The warship moved through space like a hungry beast searching for food. Its name was Crimson Talon, and it belonged to the Victoria race of tall reptilian creatures, with black scales hard as metal and eyes that glowed yellow in the dark. For 50 years, this ship had attacked human colonies. It took supplies. It took technology. It took people. Una was one of those people. She had been only 8 years old when they came to her home on Kepler 22b. She remembered the sky turning red with fire. She remembered her mother pushing her into a hiding spot under the floor. She remembered the sound of screaming. Then the Victari found her, and her old life ended forever. Now she was 23. 15 years had passed on this ship. 15 years of cleaning floors. 15 years of carrying heavy loads. 15 years of being invisible. The Victari did not see her as a person. To them, she was just a tool useful when needed, forgotten when not. Una had learned to survive by staying quiet. She never looked the Victari in their eyes. She never spoke unless spoken to. She moved through the ship like a ghost, knowing every hidden passage and forgotten corner. These secrets kept her alive when others died. The ship had many slaves. Most were human, but there were others too. Small four-armed creatures called Tullori worked in the engine rooms. Strange beings made of living crystal called Silkums powered the weapons. And then there was Sira Dodd. While Una tried not to think about Sira too much, Sira was Marathi. The galaxy feared the Marathi more than any other species. Stories said they could reach into your mind and twist your thoughts. Stories said they fed on fear and pain. Stories said they were monsters wearing the shape of people. Sarah did not look like a monster to Una. She was thin and small, with skin so pale it was almost gray. You could see dark veins under her skin like rivers on a map. 2 small horns curved back from her temples, and her eyes were pure silver with no pupils at all. When she walked, she made no sound. The Victari kept Sira as a prize. They showed her to visitors and laughed. "Look," they would say, "we captured a nightmare. Even monsters serve us now." But Una had seen Sarah cry alone in the storage rooms. She had seen Sarah give her food to younger slaves who were hungry. She had seen the old scars on Sarah's back from years of beatings. Whatever the Marathi were supposed to be, Sarah was just another prisoner. Today was different from other days. The alarms had rung that morning, and the ship shook with the sound of weapons firing. Una hid in her usual spot and waited. When battles happened, slaves who wandered often died. The Victari did not care if they hit their own property during a fight. The battle did not last long. It never did. The Crimson Talon was too powerful for most ships to fight. Within an hour, the shooting stopped, and Una heard the Victari laughing and roaring in celebration. They captured another ship. Una returned to her work, scrubbing the floors of the lower deck. Green Victari blood had splashed everywhere during the fight. One of the guards had been wounded. She worked quickly, keeping her head down. The doors opened, and she heard heavy footsteps. Victari guards were dragging new prisoners toward the holding cells. Una did not look up. Looking at new prisoners only brought pain. She would see their fear, their confusion, their hope that someone would save them. She had felt all those things once. Now she knew better, but something made her glance up anyway. Just for a moment, the guards were dragging 5 humans. 4 of them were crying or struggling or begging normal reactions. But the 5th one was different. He was a man, maybe 30 years old, with short black hair and a calm face. He wore a torn white coat with medical symbols on it. His hands had old scars across the knuckles and fingers, the hands of someone who worked hard and had seen trouble. But his eyes were what caught Una's attention. He was not afraid. He was not angry. He was watching, looking at everything. The walls, the guards, the passages, the other slaves. His eyes moved like he was taking notes inside his head, like he was making a plan. Then he looked at Yu and Adad. Their eyes met for just a second. Yuna felt something strange, like a small electric shock in her chest. This man saw her. Not through her, like the Victari did. Not past her, like most slaves learn to do. He saw her, truly saw her, and in that moment she felt like a person again. Then she looked away and kept scrubbing. It was safer not to hope. The man's name was Han Do-yoon, though Yuna did not know this yet. He was a captain in the Human Medical Corps, assigned to a small ship called the Mercy's Hand. His job was to fly into dangerous areas and help wounded soldiers. He had been doing this work for 12 years. The Victari had attacked his ship while he was treating patients. His crew fought back, but they had no chance. When the Victari boarded, Da-hyun did not resist. He let them take him without a fight. The guards threw him into a holding cell with the other new prisoners. The room was cold and dark, with metal walls and a single light that flickered. The other humans huddled together, crying softly. Do-hyun sat in the corner and waited. Over the next several hours, he listened. He heard guards walking past, counting their footsteps to measure distances. He heard machines humming through the walls, learning the ship's rhythms. He heard slaves moving in the corridors, noticed when they walked faster or slower. A guard opened the door and threw in some food-gray paste in metal bowls. The other prisoners did not move. Do-hyun ate calmly. He would need his strength. When night came, or what passed for night on a ship with no sun, Do-hyun saw her again. The woman who had been scrubbing floors. She came to collect the empty bowls, moving silently on bare feet. She did not look at the prisoners. Her face showed nothing. But Do-hyun noticed the old bruises on her arms, yellow and green from healing. He noticed how thin she was. He noticed the way she kept her body small, like she was trying to disappear. He had seen this before. He had treated survivors from Victari ships in the past. He knew what that body language meant. Years of pain. Years of fear. Years of being treated like nothing. The woman Yuna finished collecting the bowls and turned to leave. "Thank you," Do-hyun said quietly. Yuna froze. For a long moment, she did not move. No one thanked slaves. No one spoke to them with kindness. She did not know how to respond. Finally, she gave a tiny nod, so small it might have been imagined. Then she left, closing the door behind her. In the darkness of his cell, Do-hyun allowed himself a small smile. He had been on this ship for less than 1 day, but already he was learning. He knew the guards changed shifts every 6 hours. He knew the slaves moved freely through the lower levels. He knew there was at least one person on this ship who still remembered how to be human. The Victari thought he was just another piece of meat, another body to work until it broke. They did not see him as a threat. That was their first mistake. Do-hyun closed his eyes and began to plan. He did not know how long it would take. He did not know how many would help him. But he knew one thing with perfect certainty. He was not going to die on this ship, and neither was anyone else. 3 days passed on the Crimson Talon. 3 days of watching, listening, and learning. Do-hyun was moved from the holding cell to the slave quarters, a large room, filled with thin mattresses on the floor and the smell of too many bodies in too small a space. The guards gave him work immediately. He carried heavy boxes from one storage room to another. He cleaned waste from the lower decks. He did whatever the Victari told him to do. And he did it without complaint, but his eyes never stopped moving. He learned which guards were dangerous. The ones who hurt slaves for fun, who laughed when people cried. He learned which guards were lazy, the ones who slept during their watch, who took shortcuts on their patrols. He learned the ship's schedule, its routines, its weaknesses. He also learned about the other slaves. There were about 60 humans on the ship, plus a dozen Talori and 3 Silkans. Most of them had been here for years. They had given up hope. They worked because working meant they could eat, and eating meant they could live another day. They did not talk about escape. They did not dream of freedom. They had forgotten what freedom felt like. Yuna was different. Do-hyun noticed her watching him sometimes, quick glances when she thought he was not looking. She was careful, more careful than the others. She knew hidden paths through the ship, service tunnels and maintenance shafts that the Victari never used. She moved like water, flowing around obstacles without making noise. She was surviving. But she was also thinking. Do-hyun could see it in her eyes. On the third night, Do-hyun pretended to sleep while the other slaves rested. He waited until the breathing around him became slow and steady. Then he opened his eyes. Yuna was awake too. She sat in the corner, knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. The dim light from the corridor made shadows on her face. She looked tired. She looked sad. But underneath that, Do-hyun saw something else. She looked angry. Anger was good. Anger meant she had not completely surrendered. Anger was a fire that could be used. Do-hyun did not approach her that night. It was too soon. She did not trust him yet. Trust took time, and he needed her to trust him completely before he could act. The next day, he learned about Sarah. He was carrying a heavy container through the lower corridors when he heard voices around a corner. Victari voices, rough and cruel. He stopped and listened. "The monster is getting slow," one guard said. "Maybe we should teach her to work faster." "She is useless," another guard replied. "The captain keeps her only for show. I say we break her legs and see if she can still clean floors." They laughed. The sound was ugly and cold. Do-hyun carefully looked around the corner. Two Victari guards stood over a small figure on her knees. She was scrubbing the floor with a brush, her movements slow and weak. Her gray skin was covered in bruises. Her silver eyes stared down at her work. Sarah. Do-hyun had heard the other slaves talk about her in whispers. They called her the monster or the nightmare. They said she could read thoughts and control minds. They said she was dangerous. They stayed away from her. But watching her now, Do-hyun saw no monster. He saw a woman who was tired and hurt and alone. He saw someone who had been beaten down until she could barely move. He saw a patient. One of the guards kicked Sarah's brush away. "Work faster, monster." Sarah crawled after the brush without a word. Her hands were shaking. The guards laughed again and walked away. When they were gone, Do-hyun stayed in the shadows and watched. Sarah kept scrubbing, even though her arms looked ready to collapse. She did not cry. She did not make any sound at all. Then Yuna appeared. She came from a side passage, moving quickly and quietly. She knelt beside Sarah and touched her shoulder gently. Sarah flinched at first, then relaxed when she saw who it was. "You are hurt," Yuna whispered. "Let me see." Sarah shook her head. "It is nothing. I am fine. You are not fine. Your arm is bleeding." Do-hyun watched as Yuna pulled a small piece of cloth from her pocket, probably torn from her own clothes, and wrapped it around a cut on Sarah's arm. Her movements were gentle and practiced. She had done this before. "Thank you," Sarah said. Her voice was soft and musical, like wind through leaves. "You should not help me. The others will think you are strange." "I am already strange," Yuna said. "I talked to the monster in the corridors. Something passed between them, a look, a shared understanding. They were both outcasts. They both survived in a place that wanted them dead. They had found friendship in the darkness. Do-hyun watched them until Yuna finished and slipped away. Then he returned to his work, carrying his heavy container as if nothing had happened. But inside his mind, new plans were forming. He had found his people. That night, Do-hyun took a risk. He stole a small piece of wire from a broken machine and hid it in his sleeve. The next day, He stole a knife handle with no blade. The day after that, he found a piece of sharp metal in the garbage. Slowly, carefully, he began to build. He also began to talk to the other slaves. Not about escape. Never about escape. He talked about small things. Where are you from? How long have you been here? What was your job before? He listened more than he spoke. He remembered everything. Some slaves ignored him. Some looked at him like he was crazy. But a few responded. A man named Yeo, who used to be a pilot. A woman named Bora, who knew about machines. A Talori named Kex, who worked in the engine room. They were afraid. Of course, they were afraid. But they were also tired of being afraid. They just needed something to believe in. A week after his capture, Do-hyun had his medical kit. He had built it piece by piece from stolen materials. A small blade made from sharpened metal. Thread taken from old clothes. A needle made from wire. Paste made from crushed medicine tablets he found in the garbage. It was not much. It would not save anyone from serious injury. But it was something. He kept it hidden in a crack in the wall near his sleeping place. No one knew about it except him, until the night he heard screaming. It was late, deep in the ship's night cycle. Most slaves were asleep. Do-hyun was lying on his mattress with his eyes closed, but his mind was awake. Still planning. Then the screaming started. It came from the lower corridors, a high, thin sound that cut through the silence like a blade. Do-hyun's eyes snapped open. Around him, other slaves stirred but did not move. They knew better than to investigate screams, but Do-hyun was not like them. He slipped off his mattress and moved through the shadows. He knew the patrol schedules by heart now. He knew which corridors were safe. He moved quickly, following the sound. The screaming stopped before he got there. When he turned the final corner, he saw something that made his blood freeze. A Victoria officer stood in the middle of the corridor. He was large, even for his kind, with golden marks on his scales that showed his rank. In one hand, he held a bottle of Victory wine, judging by the smell. He was drunk. At his feet, pressed against the wall, was Sira. Her side was open. Claws had torn through her thin clothes and into her flesh. Silver blood, not red like humans, but bright silver like starlight, poured from the wound. It pooled on the floor around her. It ran down her legs. It dripped from her shaking hands. She looked up at the officer with eyes full of fear. "Please spare me," she whispered. Her voice was so weak it was almost impossible to hear. "I am bleeding. I am bleeding. Please." The officer laughed. It was a terrible sound, wet and cruel. "Monsters do not bleed," he said, raising his claws. "They only pretend. Let me show you what happens to pretenders." He stepped forward, ready to kill, and Do-hyun stepped out of the shadows. The officer turned his head, annoyed by the interruption. His yellow eyes narrowed when he saw a human standing there. Just a slave. Just meat. Nothing important. "Walk away," the officer growled. "This does not concern you." Do-hyun did not walk away. Instead, he smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was not a threatening smile. It was the smile of a man who had made a decision that could not be changed. The smile of someone who had nothing left to lose. "Actually," Do-hyun said, reaching into his sleeve, "it does." And he moved. The Victari were fast. Everyone in the galaxy knew this. Their bodies were built for combat: strong muscles, sharp claws, thick scales that could stop most weapons. A single Victari warrior could kill 10 humans in close combat. This was not a guess. This was a fact. But Do-hyun had spent 12 years on the frontier. He had worked in field, hospitals, while battles raged outside. He had treated soldiers from every species in the galaxy. He had opened bodies and closed them again. He knew exactly where every creature kept its weak points, the soft places where scales did not reach. where blood vessels ran close to the surface, where a single cut could end a life. The officer was drunk. His reactions were slow. He was used to slaves who ran or begged or froze with fear. He was not used to slaves who attacked. Do-hyun's hand came out of his sleeve holding the blade. He had made a piece of sharpened metal wrapped in cloth for a handle. It was not a proper weapon. It was small and rough and ugly, but it was enough. He moved low and fast, slipping under the officer's arm as those deadly claws swung through the air. The officer was aiming for where Do-hyun's head had been a moment before. He hit nothing but empty space. Do-hyun did not aim for the chest. He did not aim for the head. He aimed for the throat, the small gap between the jaw and the collar, where the scales were thin and the blood ran thick. His blade went in. The officer made a sound, not a scream, not a roar, just a wet gurgle of surprise. Silver blood mixed with green as both colors spilled onto the floor. The Victari's eyes went wide. His claws reached up to grab his throat, but it was too late. He fell. The whole fight took less than 3 seconds. Do-hyun stood over the body, breathing hard. His hand was covered in green blood. His heart was pounding in his chest. He had just killed a Victari officer. If anyone found out, they would kill him slowly over many days. The Victari were famous for their punishments, but he did not regret it. He turned to look at Sira. She was still pressed against the wall, both hands holding her wounded side. Silver blood ran between her fingers. Her silver eyes were wide with shock, staring at Do-hyun like he was something she had never seen before. "You," she whispered. "You killed him. For me." Do-hyun knelt beside her, already pulling his hidden medical kit from inside his clothes. "Do not talk. Save your strength." "But I am Marathi." Her voice was confused, almost childlike. "You know what I am. You know what they say about us. Why would you help me?" Do-hyun did not answer right away. He was examining her wound, gently moving her hands aside to see the damage. The cut was deep but clean. It had missed the important organs. With proper care, she would survive. "This is going to hurt," he said, taking out his needle and thread. "Try not to scream. We cannot let anyone hear us." "Why?" Sira asked again. "Why are you helping me?" Do-hyun looked at her. His eyes were calm and steady. "Because you are hurt," he said simply. "That is enough." Then he began to work. Sira bit her lip hard enough to draw blood, but she did not scream. The needle went in and out, closing the wound with small, precise stitches. Do-hyun worked quickly, but carefully. He had done this thousands of times before on battlefields, in hospitals, and places far worse than this. When he finished, he used his paste to cover the stitches. It would help prevent infection. Then he tore a strip from his own shirt and wrapped it around her middle to hold everything in place. "Can you stand?" he asked. Sira tried. Her legs were weak, but Do-hyun put her arm around his shoulder and helped her up. Together, they looked down at the dead officer. "We need to hide the body," Do-hyun said. "Is there somewhere nearby?" Sira pointed with a shaking hand. "There is a waste chute at the end of this corridor. It goes to the recycling chambers." They moved slowly, Do-hyun half carrying Sira while dragging the body behind them. It was hard work, but they could not leave evidence. When they reached the waste chute, Do-hyun pushed the body through. It fell into darkness and disappeared. "The blood," Sira said. "On the floor, I know." Do-hyun looked at the silver and green stains. "We need to clean it before morning patrol." He found cleaning supplies in a nearby closet, the same supplies that Sarah used for her work. Together, even with Sira wounded and weak, they scrubbed the floor until no trace of the fight remained. By the time they finished, Sira could barely stay awake. Do-hyun guided her to a small storage room he had discovered during his explorations. It was hidden behind a broken panel, a space just big enough for one person to rest. "Stay here," he said. "Do not move until I come for you." Sierra grabbed his arm. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were intense. "No one has ever done this for me," she said. "Not in all my years. Not since I was taken. The other slaves are afraid of me. They think I will hurt them. They think I am a monster." Her voice cracked. "Why are you not afraid?" Do-hyun considered the question carefully. "I have met monsters," he said finally. "Real monsters. I treated their victims. I saw what they did for fun." He shook his head. "You are not a monster. You are a person who has been treated badly for a long time. There's a difference." Sierra stared at him. Slowly, tears began to roll down her gray cheeks, silver tears, just like her blood. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know your name." "Do-hyun. Han Do-hyun. Do-hyun." She spoke his name like it was something precious. "I will not forget this. I will not forget you." Do-hyun nodded and closed the panel, leaving her hidden and safe. Then he returned to the slave quarters. He slipped back onto Entourage. His mattress as the first morning alarms began to ring. The other slaves woke and stretched and prepared for another day of work. No one noticed that Do-hyun had been gone. No one noticed the small spots of green blood still on his fingers. But Yuna noticed. She was watching him from across the room, her eyes sharp and curious. She had seen him leave in the night. She had waited for him to return. Now she was wondering what he had done. Do-hyun met her gaze and held it for a long moment. Then, very slightly, he nodded. Yuna's eyes widened. She looked down at his hands, saw the blood he had not completely cleaned away. Her face went pale, but she did not look afraid. She looked hopeful. That evening, while the slaves ate their meal of gray paste, Yuna found a way to sit near Do-hyun. They did not speak. Speaking was dangerous. But she passed him a small piece of cloth, and when he unfolded it, he found a rough map of the ship. Drawn in charcoal. Her map. Her secrets. She was joining him. Do-hyun folded the cloth and hid it carefully. Across the room, he saw Yeho, the former pilot, watching them with interest. And Bora, the woman who knew machines, was watching too. The fire was spreading. Tomorrow, Do-hyun would find a way to check on Sierra. He would make sure her wound was healing. He would bring her food and water. And then, slowly, carefully, he would begin to build something new. Not just a plan, not just a team. Revolution. The Vectari had made a mistake when they captured him. They had looked at his soft human body and seen weakness. They had looked at his gentle hands and seen no threat. They had thrown him into their ship and forgotten about him. Just another piece of meat to be used and thrown away. They did not understand humans at all. Humans were small. Humans were fragile. Humans broke easily. But humans also remembered. Humans also planned. Humans also fought not with claws and scales, but with something more dangerous. With hope. With anger. With the stubborn refusal to accept their chains. Do-hyun closed his eyes and let himself rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, new chances to make mistakes that could cost lives. But for the first time since his capture, he felt something warm in his chest. He was not alone anymore, and together, they would find a way home. Word spread through the slave quarters like water through cracks in stone. No one talked about it openly. No one dared to speak the words out loud. But everyone knew. A human had killed a Vectari officer. A human had saved the monster. For the first 3 days, the Vectari searched for their missing officer. They tore apart storage rooms. They questioned guards. They beat slaves who knew nothing, hoping to find answers in their screams. But they found nothing. The officer had been unpopular, drunk, cruel, and lazy. Many guards quietly believed he had started a fight with someone stronger and lost. They did not search too hard. Dead officers meant promotions for those below dot. By the 5th day, the search ended. Life returned to normal. The Victari went back to their routines, but nothing was normal for the slaves. Not anymore. Yuna led Do-hyun through the ship's hidden paths, crawl spaces behind walls, maintenance tunnels under floors, air vents just wide enough for a thin human to squeeze through. She had spent 15 years mapping these secrets. Now she shared them freely. "This passage goes to the engine room," she whispered, pointing at a dark opening. "That one leads to the armory. And this," she touched a small panel in the wall, "this opens into the captain's private quarters." Do-hyun memorized everything. "You found all of this yourself?" Yuna nodded. "I had to. When I was young and small, I could hide in places the Victari could not reach. It was the only way to survive when they were angry." "You are very brave." Yuna looked at him strangely. "I am not brave. I am just still alive." "That takes bravery," Do-hyun said. "More than you know." They found Sira in the hidden storage room, her wound healing slowly but surely. Do-hyun checked her stitches every day, bringing her stolen food and clean water. Yuna came too, sitting beside her friend and talking in quiet voices about nothing and everything. Slowly, Sira grew stronger. And as she grew stronger, Do-hyun began to ask her questions. "You can feel emotions," he said one evening. It was not a question. "The stories say the Mirathi can sense what others feel." Sira looked down at her hands. "Yes, it is true. Is that why they fear you? Because you can read their minds?" "I cannot read minds," Sira said quickly. "That is a lie. I can only feel impressions, strong emotions, fear, anger, joy, pain. I feel them like heat from a fire, close and warm, or distant and cold." She paused. "When the Victari are near, I feel their hatred. It is like standing in a storm." Do-hyun leaned forward. "Can you feel them now? The guards on this deck?" Sira closed her silver eyes. For a long moment, she was silent. Then she spoke. "Two guards in the corridor to the east. They are bored, tired, thinking about sleep." She tilted her head. "One officer in the command room above us. He's worried about something. A problem with the ship, maybe." She opened her eyes. "Why do you ask?" "Because knowing what they feel tells us what they will do," Do-hyun said. "Bored guards do not watch carefully. Worried officers make mistakes." He smiled. "You are not just a survivor, Sira. You are an advantage." Sira stared at him. In all her years of captivity, no one had ever called her an advantage. No one had ever suggested that her curse could be a gift. "I want to help," she said softly. "Tell me what to do." The group grew larger with each passing day. Yeho was the first to openly join. He had been a pilot before his capture, a good one, he claimed. He missed the stars. He missed the feeling of a ship responding to his commands. When Do-hyun explained his plan, Yeho's eyes lit up like someone had switched on a light inside him. "You want to take the ship?" Yeho said. "Yes, that is impossible. Maybe. But you are going to try anyway." "Yes," Yeho laughed. It was the first time he had laughed in years. "Good. I was getting bored of living." Laura came next. She was older than the others, with gray in her hair and deep lines on her face. She had been an engineer before her capture, designing engines for cargo ships. The Victari used her to repair their equipment, never realizing how much she understood about their systems. "The power grid has 17 weak points," she told Do-hyun, drawing diagrams in the dust. "Hit 3 of them at the same time, and the whole ship loses power for at least 4 minutes. What about emergency systems? They take 90 seconds to activate, and they only cover critical areas, bridge, weapons, engines. The rest of the ship stays dark." Do-hyun studied her drawings. What about doors? Can we lock them? Laura smiled. It was not a kind smile. Leave that to me. The Telori mechanics joined two small creatures with 4 arms and quick fingers, perfect for reaching places others could not. They brought knowledge of the engine room, the fuel systems, the emergency shutoffs. They were scared, but they were also angry. The Victari had worked them until their bodies broke, then replaced them with fresh slaves. They had nothing left to lose. Even the Silkins agreed to help. These strange beings of living crystal had been used as power sources, forced to fuel the ship's weapons until their light began to fade. They could not speak in words, but they communicated through patterns of light and color. When Do-yoon explained his plan, their crystals pulsed bright blue dot agreement. Excitement. Hope. The rebellion was forming. They met in the hidden spaces Yuna had discovered, changing locations every time to avoid suspicion. Do-hyun never gave orders. He asked questions instead. What do you know? What can you do? What do you need? He listened to every answer and remembered everything. Slowly, a plan took shape. The ship would jump to hyperspace in 12 days, a long journey to deliver their cargo to a Victari colony. During hyperspace travel, the crew would be relaxed. Many guards would sleep. The captain would be in his quarters. That was when they would strike. The first target is the power grid, Do-hyun explained, drawing on the floor with a piece of charcoal. Laura's team hits the weak points. The lights go out. Doors lock. The Victaria trapped in their rooms. What about the ones who are not in their rooms? Yeho asked. That is where Sira comes in. Do-hyun looked at the Mirathi woman. You will feel where they are. You will guide our teams to avoid them or to find them if we need to fight. Sira nodded. Her silver eyes were steady now, no longer afraid. I can do this. Once we control the corridors, we move to the bridge. Do-hyun drew an X on his map. Yeho takes the controls. Dora locks down the engine room. And he paused. You will kill the captain, Yuna said quietly. Do-hyun met her eyes. Yes, the room was silent. Killing the captain was not like killing the drunk officer in the corridor. Captain Kravith was the strongest Victari on the ship, a warrior who had won dozens of battles, who had broken rebels with his bare claws. Facing him was almost certainly death. I will go with you, Yuna said. No, you are needed to guide the others. I know this ship better than anyone. I know where the captain keeps his weapons. I know which doors stick and which open quietly. Yuna stood up, and for the first time, Do-hyun saw the steel in her spine. I have waited 15 years for this. You are not leaving me behind. Do-hyun studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Together then. They spent the next 12 days preparing. Weapons were made from stolen metal. Plans were memorized until everyone could recite them in their sleep. Signals were agreed upon. A cough meant danger. A whistle meant all clear. 3 taps on the wall meant go. The night before the jump to hyperspace, they gathered one last time. 40-7 slaves sat in the darkness of a storage room, pressed close together. Humans, Telori, Silkins. And Sira, sitting in the middle, no longer hiding in the corners. They looked at Do-hyun, waiting, hoping, afraid. He did not give them a speech. He did not promise victory. He simply looked at each face and nodded. Tomorrow, we are free or we are dead, he said quietly. Either way, we are not slaves anymore. It was not a battle cry. It was just the truth, but it was enough. When the ship jumped to hyperspace, the slaves returned to their work as if nothing had changed. They cleaned floors. They carried boxes. They kept their heads down and their faces blank. But inside, the fire was burning. And tomorrow, it would consume everything. The lights died at exactly midnight. One moment. The Crimson Talon was humming with life, corridors glowing, machines buzzing, guards patrolling their routes. The next moment, darkness swallowed everything. Emergency alarms began to scream, but they lasted only a few seconds before dying too. Somewhere deep in the ship, Doris smiled as she pulled the last cable from the wall. The Vectari had never bothered to protect their power systems from people who understood them. Doors slammed shut throughout the ship, locks clicking into place. In their quarters, Vectari officers woke in confusion and ran to their doors, only to find them sealed tight. They pounded on metal with their fists. They roared orders into communicators that no longer worked. They did not understand what was happening. They had never imagined that slaves could fight back in the maintenance tunnels. The rebellion moved. Syrah led the way, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. She could feel the Vectari all around them, their confusion, their anger, their growing fear. She pointed left, then right, guiding the human teams through corridors the guards could not see. 2 guards ahead, she whispered. They are scared. They do not know which way to go. Yeho nodded and signaled to his team. 4 humans moved forward, armed with makeshift weapons, metal rods, sharpened tools, chains taken from the storage rooms. They were not soldiers. They had never fought before. But they were angry, and anger made them brave. The fight was quick and ugly. The guards were strong, but they were also surprised and blind in the darkness. The humans knew these corridors. The humans had been waiting for this moment. When it was over, 2 Vectari lay on the floor, and the humans kept moving. All across the ship, similar scenes played out. Talori mechanics opened panels and pulled out wires, shutting down systems the Vectari needed to coordinate their defense. Silkens blocked doorways with their crystalline bodies, absorbing the blows of guards who tried to break through. Humans fought in groups of 3 and 4, using their knowledge of the ship to set ambushes in narrow passages. It was not clean. It was not easy. Some slaves fell and did not get up again. But the rebellion kept moving. The emergency power finally flickered to life, but by then it was too late. The slaves controlled too much of the ship. The Vectari were scattered, confused, fighting small battles in every corridor, and Doyon was heading for the bridge. Yuna led him through the hidden passages, moving faster than she had ever moved before. Her heart was pounding in her chest. Her hands were shaking, but she did not stop. She had waited 15 years for this night. She would not fail now. The bridge is just ahead, she whispered. The captain will be there. He always goes to the bridge during emergencies. Don nodded. In his hand, he held a real weapon now, a blade taken from a fallen guard. It was heavy and sharp and made for killing. He hoped he would not have to use it, but he knew he would. They emerged from the hidden passage into the corridor outside the bridge. 2 guards stood at the door, their yellow eyes scanning the darkness. When they saw Doyuna, they roared and charged. Doyun stepped forward. The first guard swung his claws in a wide arc. Doyun ducked under the blow and drove his blade into the soft spot under the guard's arm. The Vectari screamed and fell. The second guard grabbed Yuna, lifting her off the ground. His claws began to close around her throat. Dohyun moved without thinking. His blade flashed. The guard's hand fell to the floor, and Yuna dropped free. Before the guard could react, Dohyun finished him with a single thrust. Yuna stood up, breathing hard. Her neck was bruised, but she was alive. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank me yet," Dohyun said. "We still have to face him." They opened the door to the bridge. Captain Kravith was waiting for them. He stood in the center of the room, surrounded by screens showing chaos throughout his ship. His scales were dark red, almost black, and his eyes burned with fury. He was the largest Vectari Dohyun had ever seen, nearly 3 meters tall, with claws like curved swords. "Humans," Kravith growled. I should have killed you all when you came aboard. Do-hyun walked into the room, his blade ready. Behind him, Yuna stayed near the door, watching for more guards. You made a mistake, Do-hyun said quietly. You looked at us and saw weakness. You saw small bodies and soft skin and thought we were nothing. Kravith laughed. It was a terrible sound. You are nothing. You have won a few small fights because you surprised us. But I am not surprised anymore. He stepped forward, claws extending. I am Kravith. I have killed 1,000 enemies. I have broken rebels with my bare hands. What are you? I am a doctor, Do-hyun said. I heal people. I fix broken bodies. He raised his blade. But I also know exactly how to break them. Kravith attacked. He was faster than the guards, faster than the drunk officer. His claws cut through the air like lightning, aiming for Do-hyun's chest, his throat, his face. Do-hyun dodged and blocked, his blade ringing against those terrible claws. He could not win this fight. Not in straight combat. Kravith was too strong, too fast, too experienced. Every blow pushed Do-hyun backward. Every second brought him closer to death. But Do-hyun was not fighting alone. Yuna threw herself at Kravith's back, a small knife in her hand. She stabbed at his spine, at his legs, at any spot she could reach. Her attacks were weak. They barely cut through his scales, but they distracted him. Kravith roared and spun, swinging his arm to knock Yuna aside. She flew across the room and crashed into a wall. She did not move. For just a moment, Kravith's attention was elsewhere. Do-hyun took that moment. He did not aim for the chest. He did not aim for the head. He aimed for the knee, the joint where the scales were thinnest, where the tendons ran close to the surface. His blade went in deep. Kravith screamed and fell. His leg collapsed under him, and he crashed to the floor. His claws swung wildly, but Do-hyun was already moving, circling behind him. You are just a human, Kravith snarled, trying to rise. You are weak. You are nothing. Do-hyun put his blade against the captain's throat. That is the thing about humans, he said softly. You think we are weak because we break easily. You think we are nothing because we are small. He pressed the blade closer. But we do not stop. We remember every hurt, every insult, every friend we have lost. And when we decide to fight, we fight until the end. Kravith looked up at him. For the first time, fear flickered in his yellow eyes. What are you? He whispered. Do-hyun did not smile. We are humanity, he said. And we are taking back what is ours. The blade moved. When it was over, Do-hyun ran to Yuna. She was breathing but unconscious, a dark bruise forming on her forehead. He checked her pulse, her pupils, her breathing. She would live. Then Sarah's voice came through the communicator. Do-hyun, the ship is ours. The Vectari are defeated. Do-hyun closed his eyes and let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. They had won. 3 hours later, the ship had a new name. Yeho suggested calling it Second Chance, and everyone agreed. The surviving Vectari were locked in the holding cells, the same cells that had once held human prisoners. The slaves stood in the corridors, looking at each other with wonder. They were free. Yuna woke in the medical bay with Do-hyun sitting beside her. When she opened her eyes, he smiled. We did it, she whispered. We did. She looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she began to laugh. It was a strange sound, rough and rusty, like something that had not been used in years. Tears ran down her face, but she could not stop laughing. She was free. After 15 years, she was finally free. On the observation deck, Sarah stood alone, looking out at the stars of hyperspace. The other freed slaves still avoided her. Old fears died hard, but that was okay. She had learned to be patient. Footsteps approached. Yuna came to stand beside her. They are afraid of you, Yuna said. I know. They will learn. Yuna reached out and took Sarah's hand. They saw you fight with us. They saw you risk your life. Give them time. Sarah's silver eyes reflected the stars. Do you think we will make it home? Yuna considered the question. Home. She barely remembered what that word meant. I do not know, she said honestly. But we will try. And if we fail, we will try again. That is what humans do. Sarah smiled. It was a small smile, fragile and uncertain, but real. Then perhaps I will become a little bit human too. On the bridge, Do-Hyun was already planning the next steps. There were star charts to study, supplies to count, wounds to treat. The journey home would be long and dangerous. The Vektari would send ships to hunt them. The galaxy would not believe that slaves had taken a warship, but they had done the impossible once. They could do it again. He looked out at the stars and made a silent promise. There were more slaves out there. More ships like the Crimson Talon. More people waiting to be rescued. He would find them. And when he did, he would show them what humanity was made of. Not claws. Not scales. Not weapons. Just stubborn, unbreakable, impossible hope. And that was enough to change the galaxy.